Hello and hello. Welcome back to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. I'm Kylie Caldwell,
This is Kate Carter.
and it's just me and Kate
Just
today.
us. Just the two of us.
Holly is missing,
Fortunately, we do have her location, so she's only semi missing. She'll be back at some point.
but today I'm bringing you a case from Iceland. I'm going to go ahead and apologize for all the pronunciations I'm going to attempt during this episode. So bear with me because this is a case of the murder of Birna Brjánsdóttir, a case that shook the small country of Iceland, changing it forever.
When you first said hello, you also said hello.
That is hello in Iceland.
Okay, I'm just making sure that was a nod because at first I was like, did she stutter? I'm not sure.
You'll never know through this whole
You
episode.
will never know. You're going to stutter throughout the whole story.
I learned a lot about Iceland during my research, and I have to say, Kate, I think the next girls' trip needs to be to Iceland.
I'm a big Iceland stan. Like I would love to go there.
Everything I've seen about it, everyone I know that's gone says it's the best place I've ever been.
Well, okay. 2025, here we go.
So it's a very small country. It's about size of like Ohio, but Ohio has a population close to 12 million. Iceland only has a population of about 380,000.
Shut up. Wait, I had no idea. Are you serious?
It's like the size of a suburban town.
That is absolutely great. Like, that's not even, I was like, what state can I compare it to? Not even, I was like, maybe Montana because it's so spread out, but no, Montana's got way more people. Oh my God. Okay. I
It's
mean, have you ever
tiny.
met someone from Iceland?
I have.
Okay, well, never mind. I was going to say I would prove a point, but
With such a low population and easygoing lifestyle, Iceland is one of the safest countries in the world with an average of 1.5 murders a year. In most years, there are no murders at all. In the small amount of murder cases they do have, most victims are young men killed by another man they know. The country has a large number of citizens who own guns, but mainly for hunting, but their police force isn't armed. They don't even have an army.
so realistically, if we
Mhm.
put enough people together, we could overtake Iceland
Easily.
easily. Maybe even just a few people.
We get 10 Florida men
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
Iceland, it's ours.
That's it.
But you get it. Iceland's a pretty great and chill place. It's also the place where 20-year-old Birna grew up in and loved. I couldn't find much about her early life, but in her interviews, her mom, Sila, said she loved music of any genre. She loved driving, especially doing what is called runter in Iceland, where friends drive around town slowly, windows down, music blaring, just for fun. Sila said Birna was newly single, just enjoying life with friends and family. She was living with her dad in Berthold, a suburb of the capital of Reykjavik. When she wasn't out and about, Birna was working at a department store in the city. But on the night of Friday the 13th, of course, January 2017, wasn't about work. It was supposed to be a fun night out with friends. That night, Birna headed out dancing and drinking with friends at a club called Hura in the center of Reykjavik. Around 2 a.m., Birna's friends were ready to head home, but Birna decided to stay. I'm not sure if she knew anyone else at the club or not, but she stayed for 3 more hours, leaving around 5 a.m. when the club closed, which we know don't leave your friends at the bar alone.
Yeah, like ladies, that's a girl code, dude. Especially like 2017 is pretty recent.
Yes. And important to note that in the winters in Iceland, there's only about 5 hours of daylight. So it's pitch dark when Berna leaves, and the sun wouldn't rise again until around 11 a.m. It was also negative 9 degrees Celsius or 15 Fahrenheit. So she was bundled up in black jeans, a gray sweater, a black hoodie, and wearing her go to Doc Marten boots. So I'm going to show Kate the CCTV footage of Berna's last sightings, and I'll put it up on our blog for the listeners. But in the video, Berna can be seen stumbling down the main street of town, seemingly intoxicated. The video covers until around 5:30 a.m. At one point, she bumps into a stranger who is talking to a friend. She weaves around, falling into the street a bit. A second video showed her dropping money and picking it back up. At one point, she's seen eating what was later figured out to be pita from a local shop as she kept walking. There's still a few people and cars out on the street, but it doesn't look like she talks to anyone. She's also wearing headphones, probably listening to music.
I mean, just looking at the footage, I mean, I was literally wincing the entire time that I was watching it. She's definitely drunk. When she drops the money, it takes her like a minute to try to pick it back up. And then when she picks it back up, she almost falls over. But like you said, there's literally, I think, maybe 4 cars the entire time, which is a good chunk of cars to be out and about during that time,
Yeah.
you know? But also, the fact that you said she's wearing headphones just really not frustrates me, but I just can't imagine. But also, the safest country, like you don't really think much of it.
You get the gist. Birna keeps walking pretty drunk from what it looks like, and she keeps walking and walking until she's out of sight of any cameras and was never seen again. So it's pretty normal for people, even women, to walk home alone after a night out. It was a safe place. But Birna's walk home from the club back to her dad's house would have taken about 2 hours in the right state of mind without stopping. Plus, Birna had work in the morning, so it didn't really make much sense to walk home at all. So the next morning, Birna was a no call, no show to work, and her coworker Maria got concerned. This wasn't like her. Maria called a few times, but every call went straight to voicemail. Maria called the friends that Birna went out with the night before, and they told her she had stayed at the club late and was probably asleep back at her dad's house. Maria called Birna's parents, and they quickly realized something was wrong because Birna didn't come home. Birna's mom posted on Facebook asking for people to help look or if they knew where she is. And if they did, call her. The post quickly went viral in Iceland with thousands of shares. Sela also filed a missing persons report with the police, and she called the police every 30 minutes on the dot asking for an update, but there was none because police were doing nothing.
Are we shocked?
Not shocked at
Are
all
we shocked? Well, you know what? I expected more from Iceland.
because nothing bad ever happens in Iceland. It couldn't be the case now. So, by far, the majority of missing persons reports in Iceland are hunters that got lost or drunk young adults and teens crashing at a friend's house. And they're found pretty soon after, so they just assumed this is what Birna was up to, and she would show up. By Sunday, without anything, Birna's parents went to the police at 2 a.m. and begged for a search. The police said no. They did, however, track Birna's phone, finding that it last pinged at a port city about 6 miles south of Reykjavik, and it pinged around 5:50 a.m. that Saturday morning. Which, by the way, so she's seen on CCTV at 5:30 in Reykjavik.
Mm.
Her phone pings 6 miles south 20 minutes later. So physically impossible for her to walk that far that fast. So she had to have gotten into a car, but police still weren't concerned. They gave the information about the phone to the family, who then took it upon themselves to go to the area. The family and friends began knocking on doors, asking if Birna was there or if anyone had seen her. At this point, I don't think the family is, they know something's up, but I don't think they're
Like
not thinking worst
danger.
case. And yeah, they think, okay, maybe she's at some friend's house that we don't know.
Yeah.
Two brothers who didn't know Birna or her family decided to go out and help search, looking in areas near the sea. In a fenced off area between the road and the ship were a bunch of oil storage tanks, pipes, construction stuff like that. This is where the brothers found a pair of black Doc Marten boots. Once the boots were confirmed to be the exact kind Birna was last seen wearing, police finally decided they were going to help search for her.
Thank you.
So the search was led by the Icelandic Association for Search and Rescue, or ISAR, a team of emergency response volunteers. They were joined by over 800 local volunteers, making the largest search group in Icelandic history. Volunteers searched the port area, starting where the boots were found and moving out in every direction. Divers searched the freezing water, and police drones scanned the area, but nothing else came up. No Birna and none of her other belongings. Police went back through all of that CCTV footage and released it to the media, hoping someone saw her that night and maybe they saw something more. There wasn't that much footage, though, because in general, the public was against CCTV. A lot of the footage actually came from local store owners. When the police were combing through the footage, they noticed a red Kia Rio pass Birna in the opposite direction before turning around towards where she was headed. So I went through all of that footage I showed you earlier. I never saw this car, so my best guess is that they haven't released that specific footage.
Yeah, I was gonna say they edited it out.
They tried to track down who this car belonged to, but that was difficult. The license plate wasn't legible in the videos, and there were hundreds of cars that matched the make, model, and color. So they're like, okay, let's see if this car shows up on footage anywhere else, perhaps near the port where Birna's boots were found. And they would be correct. Investigators were able to follow the car to the port, where around 6 a.m. that Saturday morning, the car stopped and a man staggered out before boarding a fishing ship called the Polar Nanook. The red car drove off and returned to the ship around 11 a.m. Police couldn't identify who was in the car, but now the license plate was clear. The car was traced back to a local rental company and it had been rented by 25-year-old fisherman Thomas Olsen, a citizen of Greenland. There was a problem though, because by now the ship Thomas was working on was hundreds of miles away out in the middle of the ocean, headed back to Greenland. This is the Icelandic police's plan. It's kind of bananas. They were going to fly four Icelandic police officers on a helicopter, drop them off onto a Danish warship called the Triton that was out at sea. And then once on that ship, they were going to sail to Greenland, which was
Oh,
going to take a while,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
pick up some police officers from Greenland, sail back out into the ocean to the Polar Nanook, and arrest Thomas.
Oh. Well, I mean, Kylie, that just seems logical.
It doesn't, but
I'm following everything they're putting down.
I also learned a lot about Greenland and Denmark. They're going to come up a lot. So I had no idea. I don't know if you knew this, but Greenland is like a territory of Denmark.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so like
Yes.
Greenland governs itself. They have,
Yes. Yeah.
but Denmark controls the military, foreign policy, currency, etc. So Iceland needed help from Denmark and Greenland in order to get this guy. So while Iceland is planning all this and putting everything together, getting ready to go sail out into the sea, the news broke in Iceland that Thomas Olsen is a suspect. A journalist in Iceland did some digging and found out that the fishing ship had its own private Facebook group for crew members. He joined the group and messaged Thomas directly, asking him about the car and his involvement in Birna's disappearance. I don't think Thomas responded, but he did go to the ship's captain and told him that the police back in Iceland were looking into him and he was worried about the press and keeping his job. He didn't confess to doing anything, and the captain was like, "No, you're good. Your job's safe. Why don't you go to your cabin, sleep it off? Also, here's some sleeping pills to help with your anxiety."
Hmm.
The captain is a real one because he basically
He
knocked
drugged him.
Thomas out.
He drugged him.
He did. The captain then started researching the case and he saw the footage of the car and their media reports of Thomas possibly being involved. And he recognized him in the footage. And he also recognized the drunk guy who got out of the car, another crew member named Nikolaj Olsen. Not related, same last name though. So the captain then turned off the ship's Wi Fi and made an announcement that there was an engine malfunction and they would have to sail back to Iceland. This wasn't true. He was going to bring Thomas and Nikolaj straight to the Icelandic police himself,
He's a
which
real one.
he is a real one.
Hmm.
And luckily, he did this before they set off on that weird voyage plan. I don't know. So once the ship was in Icelandic waters, six officers, part of the Viking squad, which is a badass name,
Yeah, that is.
propelled down out of a Coast Guard helicopter and boarded the ship. Thomas and Nikolaj were quickly arrested and held securely in the ship because they still had to sail for 12 more hours back to the port. During the sail, officers began to search the ship and they found a whole lot. They found 20 kilograms of hashish, which apparently is a cannabis concentrate,
And that's a lot.
valued at over 1.4 million euros. So that was just in Thomas's cabin. They also found more drugs elsewhere in the ship and ended up arresting two other crew members. Most importantly, police found Birna's driver's license in a trash can in Thomas's cabin. The ship arrived back into the port it departed from to it being completely shut down for miles by police. Thomas Nikolaj and the two others arrested were taken to the police station for questioning, while the Icelandic counterterrorism unit boarded the ship to continue their search. Because keep in mind, Birna is still missing. The only items they found so far are the boots and now her license. Once at the station, Thomas and Nikolaj were separated for questioning, but they both gave the same story. Nikolaj said he took a cab from the port to a pub in Reykjavik called the English Pub. He won some game, awarding him 8 free beers, so naturally he got super drunk. Thomason drove into the city to meet up with him in that red Kia Rio. Despite Nikolaj claiming to be absolutely hammered at this point, they went to another bar on Lagaverger Street, the same street where Birna was walking down. Both Thomas and Nikolaj said they picked up two women who they don't know their names, and they were planning on partying with them. But
Hmm.
Nikolaj was too drunk and he passed out and threw up in the back of the car. So Thomas drove him back to the ship and he headed off with the two women. And he said they fooled around for about an hour and then he went back to the ship. Police had direct evidence that contradicts basically everything Thomas and Nikolaj said. To start, the footage showed Thomas dropping Nikolaj off at his ship around 6 a.m. He didn't return until 11, so not an hour like he claimed. Thomas did rebuke this and say he slept in the car nearby, but the mileage on the car didn't add up. They had the records from like the rental company that showed how many miles the car had before and after Thomas rented it.
Yeah.
Apparently, it was quite a long distance. In addition, Thomas's phone had been turned off the entire time from dropping Nikolaj off until he got back to the ship. Another checkmate police had was either surveillance or witness accounts of Thomas buying cleaning products, trash bags, and clothes from a store during the time he was supposedly sleeping in the car.
Okay, so he's just lied.
Just left, right, and center.
Yeah.
Thomas said he bought these things to clean up Nikolaj's vomit in the car. Police did not believe this and they asked Thomas to take off his shirt. And what do you know? He had scratches all over his chest.
Okay. All right. He did it.
We got a lot of evidence so far.
Yeah. It ain't looking good, you know?
No. So Thomas and Nikolaj were detained while police continued investigating and still looking for Birna. Now that Thomas was in custody, they compared his fingerprints to other prints found, and his matched those found on Birna's driver's license in the trash and on the laces of her Doc Marten boots.
It's a good chunk of evidence.
We're not done yet. Police also finished processing the rental car, and like they suspected, Thomas didn't clean up vomit. They found traces of blood, and when luminol was sprayed, the car lit up like a Christmas tree. The blood samples in the back seat later returned as a match to Birna's DNA. While all the forensic work was going on, the people and the police are still looking for her. And unfortunately, her body was found on January 22nd, 9 days after her disappearance. A search helicopter located her naked body 30 miles from the port where the boat was, washed up onto the rocks near a lighthouse. An autopsy revealed that Birna was struck in the face and strangled, but there were no signs of sexual assault. And get this, her cause of death was drowning. She was alive when she was thrown into the water.
That makes me so upset. Can you imagine too? And like she obviously had been beaten up pretty bad.
Beaten up, drunk, naked, in below freezing water.
Yeah. I assume, I mean, I will say, not that it's any help, but she most likely died very quickly.
I hope so for her sake. Birna's funeral was attended by over 2,000 people, and memorials were set up in both Iceland and Greenland, with more citizens putting down flowers and paying their respects, including the president and prime minister. Everyone in both Iceland and Greenland wanted justice for Birna, which brings us to the trial. Nikolaj was actually released from custody 2 weeks after his arrest after police determined he wasn't involved. Not sure if he knew what happened or if he was just too drunk to notice. Thomas, however, was officially charged on March 30th, 2017, for the murder of Birna and also for the possession of drugs. He pled guilty to the drug charges, but not guilty to the murder. The trial had 5 different languages being spoken, so it took quite a while.
Wait, from different people? It wasn't translated to 5 different languages. It had people were speaking 5 different languages.
Yes, people were speaking 5 different languages, and they all had to be interpreted.
Is that, do we know? I don't, because obviously I don't know much about Iceland, but do they have different multiple languages, like depending on regions and stuff like that?
No, so they just have Icelandic, which is in that. They had Danish, English, Greenlandic, and then something called Jaren, which I'd never heard of. The big thing that came out at trial was that Thomas Olsen had been charged and acquitted of raping an unconscious woman in Greenland.
Oh,
So he has a history.
not a good one.
Would hope by now our listeners know that we can't really bring up prior convictions in the United States, especially if someone was acquitted. Can't bring up those charges. In Iceland, though, totally acceptable.
I actually feel like a lot of people in the US don't know that. That's a law, like we think people know that just because we know it, but
Should I explain?
yeah.
Okay, so there's pros and cons to this, but in the United States, if, say, you're arrested and brought to trial for robbery, the prosecution can't bring up the fact that you have been convicted of robbery in the past. because they don't want to, like bias the jury. Like, okay, obviously you did it last time. You obviously did it this time. But then there are exceptions where, in order to like show a pattern, like, okay, you wore a red mask when you robbed the bank in 2011, and you wore a red mask when you robbed the bank this time. So that would show a pattern.
It's a pro and a con because also people convicted is a lot different than charged, you know? So if you are convicted of 7 robberies and for some reason you did not get charged for 7 robberies, but the 8th robbery, which is current, is the exact same style and pattern, and they have footage of you from the last ones, like something's happening, you know, like it
Yeah.
ain't looking good, but can't bring it up unless it's obviously pattern wise. But
There's some bias issues, but in Iceland it's totally okay. And so this was brought in front of the judges. So it's just something else I learned. They don't have juries in Iceland.
oh, it's a single person.
They have between 3 to 7, depending on the level of court.
Guess because it's such a small like you know, like you can't have juries with 350,000 people, right? Or maybe I don't know.
I guess not because everyone would kind of know each other at some point.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, but it would be very, you know, if Ohio just existed on its own,
It would be hard to find an
it would be
impartial
hard.
jury.
Yeah, that didn't have some type of relation in common.
Yeah. Fun fact, there are only 64 judges in Iceland. There are about 40,000 in the US.
Oversaturated.
Which brings me to my next debate topic is jury versus judges
Yes,
trials.
that's a big thing.
I understand we're supposed to be, judged by our peers, and you have the option to choose between a jury and a judge.
Always pick a judge. No, wait, actually, if you're guilty, pick a jury.
If you're guilty, pick a jury. If you're innocent, pick the judge.
Yeah.
That's your lawyer tip for the day.
Why are we letting people who have no legal background decide the fate of stuff?
No, and it's all like emotion
It
and
is based off of looks. It's based off of how well the prosecution presents their evidence. Like if you get a bad vibe about somebody in the courtroom, but they're completely innocent, but you get a bad vibe from them, maybe because they're covered in tattoos or they don't look a certain way or walk or talk like they speak a different language, you know, there's so many biases
yeah.
that go into it. And also, I mean, media plays I've always been pissed off about the whole media thing of like everybody knows everything before a trial, like some of those big trials go happen. So then people are automatically biased.
Yeah, there's no way you can find someone who has zero bias,
Mm-hmm.
zero knowledge beforehand, and it's going to be fair the whole time. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, we're for judge only. To become a judge is ridiculous. Okay.
Mhm.
The stuff that you have to go through and the time that it takes to become a judge and get appointed, like you have to be chosen, you know, you have to go through the whole process of it. A judge solely, because you have to have proof the entire time, a judge can solely only go off legal rulings, you know, like they cannot have any bias when it comes to stuff.
We're
Anyway,
pro judge. We're pro
pro
judge.
judge. But let me know if you're pro jury.
At trial, Thomas changed his story. Instead of dropping Nikolaj off at the ship and going to hook up with these two women, sleeping in his car, maybe buying cleaning supplies, he now claims that the man in the CCTV footage, drunk, stumbling out of the car, was him, and it was Nikolaj who drove off with the women and killed
Oh,
Birna.
yeah.
Switched up on his friend. Of course, prosecutors had evidence to rebut this with footage of him buying the supplies. You can clearly see his face in it. They also had Nikolaj, who testified against Thomas. In the end, Thomas was convicted and sentenced to 19 years in prison for the murder of Birna and ordered to pay 7 million kroner or $66,000 to her parents. For drug possession, he was also charged a 29 million kroner fine, which equates to about $243,000 in US. It still weirds me out when I hear cases from other countries and you're like, okay, murder, 19 years. Like in the US, that's like an automatic life sentence. Like
Yeah.
people get 19 years for a little bit of weed.
Yeah, I was literally about to say the same thing. That is, you just be killing everybody out there, you know? Like that is absolutely nuts. And I mean, 19 years, who knows, could serve 10.
Yeah, I don't know what their
Well, I don't know.
parole system's like. And like he's 25 at the time of this.
Yeah, he's gonna be fine. He'll live a regular life afterwards, you know, like there's not gonna be any issues. How sad.
I know I go back and forth. I'm like, putting someone in prison for the rest of their life. I mean, for murder, yeah. Other crimes, I'm like, okay, people can change.
For me personally, I know it's controversial, but like life in prison, it needs to be like a you've killed someone
It has to be, yeah.
purposefully.
So in November of 2018, Thomas sought an appeal for a reduced sentence, reaffirming his innocence. He also argued that the Icelandic police violated his civil rights during the interrogation. So the rules of being arrested and interrogated in Iceland are pretty similar to the US. There's a set amount of time you can be held without being charged. You have a right to not say anything. You have a right to a public defender, yada, yada. Thomas argued that he was detained for 44 hours before his arrest. And during this time, he was continually released from interrogation, taken to a cell where he fell asleep, only to be woken up and taken back for further interrogation over and over again. The prosecution argued that the only reason he was taken back and forth was because of the nature of the crime. At this point, there was a missing young woman. They also argued that Thomas was only awoken twice, and one time was for him to be brought in front of a judge for a warrant for his DNA and fingerprints. By February of 2019, Thomas Olson's appeal was rejected. The panel of 3 judges recognized that the police were wrong in holding him for so long and continually waking him, but the most important fact was that none of this affected the determination in the case that he was guilty. Thomas spent a bit of time in prison in Iceland before he was transferred to Denmark to serve the rest of his sentence. More foreign policy talk. Iceland, and I guess a lot of other countries, if they're holding a foreigner in their prison, policy is to take them back to their home country as soon as possible. Like they don't want to waste their time holding
I
them.
don't want to. Yeah.
And then Greenland's policy is to send their dangerous prisoners to Denmark,
Yeah.
who are better equipped to handle them. So that's how he ended up in Denmark. And that is where I assume he is still today. The latest update I could find was from 2018. Not sure if he's going to serve out his whole sentence, but I hope so. Senseless murder of Birna was nothing but tragic and really struck a chord in the Icelandic people. Soon after, women created a group on Facebook for a women's only rideshare group. The hashtag I am Birna trended on social media with women showing solidarity. I mentioned it earlier, but before this case, Icelandic people were weary of CCTV cameras and there were only a few set up. Since Birna's murder, the number of cameras has doubled and people are more cautious. One last thing, the crew and owners of the Polar Nanook ship donated money to the volunteers and search crews who worked Birna's case. The crew also laid a wreath on her grave. And that was the story of the murder of Birna Brjánsdóttir, a story that changed an entire country forever.
That is absolutely nuts. What a sad story and a sad ending. Obviously, he didn't get enough time, but also the ship. Those are good people.
The captain is my hero.
Oh my gosh. He would, if he was in the US, he'd win a reward.
I couldn't find his name. He's like anonymous.
He's a hero. Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. He's like, here, take some sleeping pillows because you're so stressed. I've drugged you.
One time drugging someone is for the good.
Yeah, but also like I guess if it was in the US, the captain would probably get in trouble as well.
Probably. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. If you want even more information, including photos and videos from the case, you can check out our blog on overmydeadpod.com. Be sure to leave us a review wherever you're listening to this and check us out on social media at Over My Dead Pod. We'll see you next week with another case. Bye.
Bye.
All right. For overtime,
Yeah.
we have more J-Lo gossip.
Dude, I mean, obviously, you've seen the news.
Oh, it's all I think about. It's all I see.
Yeah. So tell the people what they want to hear.
Where we picked up or chopped off last time was J-Lo canceling her world tour that wasn't selling to focus on her family.
Wow, wow, wow.
And there were like rumors of marriage troubles, but that just kind of seemed to like, to me at the time, it seemed like an excuse for her canceling the tour due to low ticket sales. But then all of a sudden, her and Ben Affleck are getting a divorce.
Done. Donezo. Cancel the tour because there was family issues.
Turns out there was.
Yeah. J-Lo and Ben no more, which we've seen 1,000 times, but divorce is a big one. And then so obviously the news came out. And then did you see her pictures that she posted immediately after?
Oh, the like thirst trap, I'm doing better without you post?
Yes. Like one is her looking skinny mini, gorgeous, snatched. And then the other picture was her in a bathing suit, but she's taking a selfie, but the mirror's behind her. So it's just her butt. She's living life. I mean, she's like, I'm getting a divorce and look at me, I'm hot.
Well, I think she's probably on the hunt for the next one. I just Googled it. She's been engaged 6 times,
Hmm.
married 4 times.
Okay, that's a lot. I will say, not to give her any defense, I cannot imagine being famous and having to like have relationships.
My worst fear in life is to be famous.
Like it sounds horrible.
You're super rich and you're beautiful. I don't know. I don't feel bad for her.
No, I assume it was something that she did. And then did you see there was paparazzi? Okay, do you remember the old pictures of Ben where like he ordered DoorDash or Uber Eats or something and going back to
Yes.
his house and he looked horrible. He looked like someone just ran him over with a car. Well, then the other day after the divorce had been announced, before JLo posted the pictures, paparazzi pictures, literally, it was like a remake almost. And he was getting food from outside DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever. And the dude looked amazing. He was like happy, smiling. He could have just skipped away and then everybody would have been like, yeah, he looks great. It was the happiest I've seen him.
I know every photo and video I've seen of them together, he looks absolutely miserable.
He definitely was not the pants in the relationship.
No,
I would be a little scared of JLo if I was married to her.
I'm scared of her and I don't even know her.
Yeah. Yeah. Jenny from Bronx. Anywho, so yeah, we just wanted to let you guys know
That we still hate J-Lo.
that we still don't like JLo and go Ben with his
I
giant
mean,
tattoo on his back.
remember when he tried to say that it wasn't real, that it was for a movie role?
Clothing. Yeah. And then it never went away
No.
because he was so embarrassed. For those who don't know what we're talking about, go Google Ben Affleck back tattoo. It is a phoenix rising from fire, but the first of all, the drawing's horrible, but it covers his entire back and it's colored.
He doesn't have any other tattoos, does he? Like, that's a weird one
No.
to get.
I mean, full back tattoo and of not a good one. Oh, Benifer. Oh, wait, no, Ben. Just Ben.
Just Ben.
I'm just Ben.